"Mr. Whitman," she said, "our student is in the music room. Please, follow me." The music room was a large space with a high ceiling and a floor of polished hardwood. In the corner stood a Steinway grand piano, black and gleaming. And sitting at the piano, with her back to the door, was a young woman. "Her name is Lily," Margaret said. "She is 17 years old. She has been playing piano since she was 5, and she has exceptional talent. But she is also extremely difficult. She has been expelled." Surprise her. She sat at the piano one last time and played a piece she had written herself. She called it the piano teacher. And it was the most beautiful thing she had ever played. The end were written in the center in neat, precise handwriting. Below his name, in the same handwriting, were the words, "A matter of some importance." Thomas opened the envelope and took out the letter inside. It was brief, consisting of only a few lines of text. "Dear Mr. Brennan, you do not know me, but I know you. I know what you did in the summer of 1984. I know what happened at the lake. I know what you did not tell the police. If you would like to discuss this matter, please be at the corner of hiding for 30 years, since she faked her death and disappeared. The question is, why and what really happened that night?" "I don't know," Thomas said. "I swear to you, I don't know. When we left the lake that morning, she was gone. We thought she had gone back to the city. We didn't find out she was missing until weeks later." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. "And you expect me to believe that it's the truth," Thomas said. "I don't know what happened to her after we left. I swear, to keep going. She died 3 days later, on a warm evening in June, with the sun setting over the mountains and the sound of birds singing in the trees." Thomas was with her at the end, holding her hand as she slipped away. And as he sat there, watching the light fade from her eyes, he felt something he had not felt in 30 years. He felt free. The end of their lives. They spoke to someone, bought something from someone, asked directions from someone. The trick was to keep looking until you found the right person who remembered the right thing. On his 3rd day in town, he found her. Her name was Dorothy Parker, and she was 78 years old. She lived alone in a small house on the edge of town, and when Marcus knocked on her door, she looked at him with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen a great deal in her life. "I am looking for legitimate business." But none of this was proof that he had harmed his wife. Marcus needed something concrete. He needed to find where Richard Bellamy had taken Sarah, and he needed to find it before Bellamy realized he was being investigated. He went back to Evergreen one more time. He spent hours at the cottage, looking for anything Dorothy Parker might have missed. And in the back of a drawer in the kitchen, he found a scrap of paper with an address written on it. The address was in. Was all. No details. No explanation. Just the bare facts and a request to come and identify the body and make arrangements for the burial. Eli had taken the next train. Now, standing on the platform, he wondered if he should have called ahead. He wondered if anyone in this town even remembered him. He had left when he was 17, running away in the night with 2 suitcases and $40 he had saved from his job at the fish market. He had left a note for his father that said only, "I am." Turned off every morning at dawn, he had learned to read by the light that glowed through his bedroom window. He had dreamed his earliest dreams beneath its steady, unwavering beam. And now his father was dead, and the lighthouse was dark, and Eli was the last Vance left in the world. Chapter 2, The Body. The sheriff's office was a small brick building next to the harbor, with a flag out front that drooped in the damp air. Eli pushed through the door and found himself in a reception area that were from the 1890s, and they were all from the same paper, the Portland Daily Herald. He flipped through them until he found what he was looking for. The headline read, "Young Woman Drowns at Harbor Haven Lighthouse." The story beneath it described how a young woman named Eliza Bell, the eldest daughter of a wealthy Boston family who were summer residents of Harbor Haven, had drowned near the lighthouse on the night of August 15, 1894. Her body had been found the next morning, washed up on the August 20, 1894, 5 days after Eliza Bell's death. The letter was addressed to the Lighthouse Board in Washington, D.C., and it was written by Thomas Whitmore. The letter described, in careful and bureaucratic language, how Eliza Bell had come to the lighthouse on the night of August 14, 1894, in a state of great agitation. She had been drinking, with Morand, and she had accused him of things that were not true. She had become violent, and in the struggle, she had fallen against the Phil. He felt, for the first time in a very long time, something like peace. The end. Joseph Crane, Chapter 3, The Detective. The detective was named Thomas Riley, and he was 60 years old and retired from the Boston Police Department. He had worked homicide for 20 years, and he had seen every kind of death imaginable. He had retired 5 years ago, and he had intended to spend the rest of his life playing golf and forgetting the things he had seen. But then, one day, his phone rang. It was a lawyer named Harold Stevens. He had a case, Stevens said, a woman named Evelyn. Results came back 2 days later. The pills in the bottle were not digitalis. They were something else. A compound that looked like digitalis, but was in fact a poison that would kill slowly, over a period of weeks, and that would be undetectable in a standard autopsy. Someone had been poisoning Evelyn Crane, and someone had done it so carefully, so methodically, that no one had ever suspected. Chapter 5, The Arrest. Riley brought his findings to the police. They issued an arrest warrant for
Turn this place around. Henry looked at his son. Michael had his mother's eyes, dark and serious, and his father's stubbornness. He had been saying, "Give me another year" for the past 5 years. And every year, the theater lost more money. "There's nothing to turn around," Henry said. "The theater is dying. It's been dying since I was your age. It's time to accept reality and move on." But Michael would not accept. He went to the bank and applied for a loan to buy out his father's share. He went. Interchanges in the country. He picked up the phone and heard the voice of his assistant, a young man named Paul Chen, who sounded terrified. "There's been an accident," Paul said, "on the suspension bridge. A cable has snapped." Michael was out of bed and dressed in 5 minutes. He drove through the empty streets of Boston at 4 in the morning, the traffic lights blinking yellow against the darkness, and arrived at the suspension bridge to find a scene of chaos. The bridge spanned the city. To pay attention was to create a crisis. If the bridge fell, people would die, and that would be a tragedy. But if the bridge almost fell and was saved at the last moment by a dramatic repair, then the city would have to invest in maintaining it for the next 50 years. You gambled with thousands of lives. I know. Martin's eyes were wet. I know what I did. And I have lived with it every day for 5 years. But I would do it again, because the alternative was to watch the bridge fall on.
The Hidden Garden. Chapter 1. The house. The house at 14 Sycamore Lane had been empty for 23 years when Elizabeth Marsh finally decided to buy it. She was a 45-year-old widow, a former professor of botany who had spent the last decade traveling the world and writing books about rare plants. She had come to this small town in Connecticut looking for a place to settle down. And when she saw the house, with its faded brick facade and its overgrown garden, she knew it was a gone. "Where are they?" Frank asked. Marino smiled. "If I told you that, I'd have to kill you. And I'm not in the killing business. I'm in the theft business." Chapter 4. The Trial. Tony Marino went to trial in federal court in Miami. The case against him was based mostly on Robert Vance's testimony, which was corroborated by some physical evidence that Vance had kept, including copies of the original blueprints and receipts for materials that matched the specifications of the break-in. The stayed in the house alone. Margaret had left, with a promise to return in the morning, and Mary was alone in the house on the hill, surrounded by the ghosts of her grandmother's past. She could not sleep. She lay in the bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old house settling and creaking in the wind. And sometime after midnight, she got up and started to explore. She found the diary in a locked drawer in Catherine's study. The drawer was not hard to
most technically demanding and emotionally intense pieces in the piano repertoire. What happened next surprised Clara. Lily played the ballad as if her life depended on it. Her fingers flew across the keys, and the music filled the room, raw and powerful and overwhelming. There were mistakes, technical imperfections, places where the rhythm faltered. But underneath all of that was something extraordinary, a passion, a fire, a depth of feeling that Clara had rarely heard in 30 years of. And back home in Boston, she taught Lily for 3 more years, until Lily was accepted to the New England Conservatory and then, later, to a prestigious program in Vienna. Lily became a concert pianist, and she was good, and she was famous, and she never forgot where she had come from. Every year, on the anniversary of the concert, Lily would send Clara a letter. And every year, Clara would sit at her piano and play, and she would remember. She remembered David, and the life they had shared. Someone who was there that night. Someone who has kept the secret for 30 years. And now, that person is willing to share what they know. For a price. Chapter 4, The Offer. Margaret slid a photograph across the table. It showed a woman, older now, but with the unmistakable features of the girl Thomas remembered. Diana Cole. She was alive. She had been found. This was taken last month, Margaret said. Diana Cole is alive and well, and living under a different name in Vermont. She has been, glad. I was glad that even though I was gone, at least you got to stay. Thomas took her hand. It was thin and cold, but her grip was still strong. I never forgot you, he said. Even when I tried to forget, I couldn't. You were always there, in the back of my mind, like a ghost. I know, Diana said. You were always there for me too. Even when I was running, even when I was hiding, I knew there was someone out there who remembered me. Who remembered the girl I used to be, and that made it easier. A woman named Sarah Bellamy, he said. She disappeared from here 6 months ago. I believe she passed through this town. Dorothy Parker studied him for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured for him to come in. I wondered when someone would come asking, she said. Please, sit down. Chapter 3, The Story. Dorothy Parker lived in a small house that was immaculately clean and filled with books. She made tea for Marcus and herself, and they sat in her living room, surrounded by shelves, evergreen, hoping to disappear completely. But Richard had found her, and he had taken her to Maine. And he had kept her there, drugged and imprisoned, for 6 months. He told me he was going to kill me, Sarah said. He said it was just a matter of time. He said no one would ever find me. What happened? Marcus asked. How did you end up in that bed? The police found me, Sarah said. They got a tip. Someone anonymous called in and told them where I was. I don't know who it was, Marcus knew. Who? Expression of someone trying to place a face from the distant past. Then his eyes widened. Lord have mercy, he said. You're Arthur Vance's boy, little Eli Vance, all grown up now. Eli smiled the kind of smile you smile when you are not sure what to say. That's right, he said. I'm back. Well, the station master said, shaking his head slowly. Who would have thought it? Your father was just telling me about you not 2 weeks ago. Said you were doing important work in Boston, said you. Repeated. That's the way it looked, the sheriff said. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no indication of foul play. He was 67 years old, and he'd been having heart problems for the past year or so, according to the doctor in town. It's possible he just died of natural causes. But you don't think so, Eli said. The sheriff looked at him for a long moment. What makes you say that? Because if you thought it was natural causes, you wouldn't have written to me the way you did, you would. The nurse had told him that she slept most of the day, and that her memory came and went. But when he introduced himself and mentioned his father's name, something flickered in her eyes. "Arthur Vance's son," she said. "I remember Arthur. He came to see me once, about a year ago. He asked me questions about my sister, about what happened at the lighthouse. What did you tell him?" Mr. Bell was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was distant, as if she were reading from a script. Acknowledgement. It was the truth spoken aloud. At last, in the place where it had been buried for so long. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky began to darken. Eli watched as the lighthouse came alive, its great beam of light sweeping across the sea, illuminating the rocks and the waves and the endless expanse of water. His father had tended this light for 30 years. He had climbed the tower every evening and lit the lamp, and he had climbed it every morning and extinguished it. Crane had died, and her nephew was contesting the will. The nephew claimed that Joseph Crane, the husband, had killed his wife for the inheritance. The problem was that there was no evidence. Evelyn Crane had died of heart failure, and her doctor had signed the death certificate. Unless someone could find something, the case would never come to trial. Riley took the case. He started by researching Joseph Crane. He had been a businessman, it turned out, in the textile industry. He had made, and leave no trace. Someone had been experimenting in this room. Someone had been trying to find a way to kill without being detected. And in the corner of the room, Riley found the bottle. It was labeled Digitalis, the heart medication that Evelyn Crane had been taking for years. But when Riley examined it more closely, he noticed that the bottle had been opened and resealed, and the pills inside were not the same color as they should have been. He sent the bottle to the lab for analysis. The
Evil thought it was haunted by memory, by the thousands of people who had come here over the years to watch movies and fall in love and escape from their lives for a few hours, by the joy and the laughter and the tears that had filled this place for half a century. One night, Michael decided to try to communicate. He sat in the front row of the theater, in the middle of the auditorium, and he spoke aloud. "I know you're here," he said. "I know this place is special to you, like it's special to me. Stories that people told about it, year after year, generation after generation. And that, in the end, was the only kind of immortality any of us could hope for. The end." He took a job as a consultant, advising private companies on bridge construction and maintenance. He traveled the country, inspecting structures and writing reports and trying to forget the image of that broken cable, swaying in the wind. But he could not forget. The suspension bridge stayed with him, a ghost that followed him everywhere he went. He dreamed about it at night. He thought about it during the day. He could not stop wondering who had really sabotaged the bridge. And
would be working in her study and hear the sound of a greenhouse door opening and closing. She did not believe in ghosts, but she could not explain what she was hearing. She started leaving notes for whoever or whatever was in the house. She would write messages and leave them on the kitchen table, or on the desk in the study, or on the workbench in the greenhouse. And sometimes, when she came back, the notes would be moved, or turned over, or left in different places. She began to waiting for someone to find them. And he thought about himself, 81 years old, finally able to let go. He retired to a small house in Vermont, where he spent his last years fishing and reading and thinking about all the cases he had solved and all the criminals he had caught. And when he died, at the age of 87, the only thing in his personal effects was a newspaper clipping about the Madison Avenue jewelry store robbery, with the headline, "Diamonds Missing, Police Baffled." And messages from those who had passed on. She went back to the house on the hill only once, to scatter Catherine's ashes in the garden. And as she stood there, in the overgrown garden, she felt a presence beside her, warm and familiar, like a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, a voice said, and Mary smiled because she understood. The gift was not a curse. It was a connection, a way of reaching across the divide between the living and the dead, and of bringing them together in love. Mary.
Her technique, she did not give her exercises or drills. Instead, she talked to her. She asked her about her life, her family, the things that had happened to her. And slowly, piece by piece, the story came out. Lily's mother had died when she was 12. Her father had remarried, and her stepmother had no patience for music. Her father had been so busy with work that he had not noticed what was happening to his daughter. Lily had been sent from one music school to another. Each one more knew she would never feel the same way about him. But one night, something had happened, something that had changed everything. Thomas did not like to think about that night. He had spent the past 30 years trying to forget it, burying the memory so deep that he had almost convinced himself it had never happened. But now, reading the letter in his hand, he knew that someone else remembered. Someone else knew. Chapter 3, The Meeting. Thomas went to the meeting. He told himself he had known. She nodded slowly. Very well, she said. I believe you believe that. But my client is not interested in your beliefs. My client is interested in the truth. And the truth is worth a great deal of money. She pulled a second photograph from her handbag. This one showed the lake at night, the water black and still under a full moon. And in the photograph, barely visible, were 3 figures standing at the end of the dock. The person who sent me this photograph says that these 3 figures are you. I'll die free. At least I'll die with my name and my truth and my story intact. And maybe, at the end, that's all any of us can hope for. Chapter 7, The End. Diana did go to the police. She walked into the station in Burlington on a bright May morning and told them everything. The fake death, the years in hiding, the life she had lived. The police investigated, and they found enough evidence to charge her with filing a false missing persons report. But given her terminal diagnosis, they allowed. Back was blank, except for a small stamp in the corner that showed a tree with its roots visible above the ground. I don't take jobs I don't know anything about, Marcus said. Who sent you? What kind of work? Yelena smiled, a slow, sad smile that seemed to contain more emotion than her words had. You were pointed in our direction by a friend, she said. Captain William Hartley at the NYPD. He said you were the best at finding people who did not want to be found. Marcus knew Hartley. They had fought him. I could hear them shouting from the cottage. But he was stronger. He put her in the car and drove away. I tried to stop them. But I am an old woman, and I could not do anything. I called the police the next day, but they said there was nothing they could do. They said Sarah was an adult and she had chosen to leave. But you did not believe that. Of course I did not believe it. That man did not come for her because she wanted to leave. He came for her because he was taking her flight to Evergreen, about the abduction, about the imprisonment. She was calm and composed, and she did not cry, even when Richard Bellamy's lawyer tried to destroy her with questions designed to make her look like an unstable woman who had invented a fantasy to explain her own disappearance. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, they found Richard Bellamy guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. As the bailiffs led him away, You were making a name for yourself in Boston. He was proud of you. I could tell, even if you didn't say it straight out. Eli did not know what to say to this. His father had never expressed pride in him, not once, not in any of the few memories Eli had of their life together. Arthur Vance had been a hard man, a man of few words and few emotions, a man who spent his days tending the Harbor Haven Lighthouse and his evenings reading books about maritime history. He had not been cruel, exactly. Faintly sweet and unpleasant, like flowers left too long in a vase. I'll start with the facts, the sheriff said, settling back into his own chair. Your father was found dead on the morning of October 4th. At approximately 6:30 a.m. his body was discovered in the storage shed behind the lighthouse, the one he used as a workshop. The preliminary cause of death appears to be heart failure. He was sitting in his chair, at his workbench. It looked like he simply stopped. Stop, Eli. Showed the Harbor Haven lighthouse and the area around it. There were shots of the lighthouse keeper and his family, of the rocky coastline, of the ships that had been guided safely into harbor by the lighthouse's light. But one photograph was different. It showed 3 women standing on the rocks near the lighthouse. They were young, perhaps in their 20s, and they were dressed in the fashion of the 1890s. 2 of them were smiling, but the third was looking directly at the camera within. The Grand Hotel, Chapter 1, The Lobby. The Grand Hotel had been built in 1923, at the height of the Jazz Age, when Boston was the richest city in America and Beacon Hill was the most prestigious neighborhood in Boston. It was a hotel of the old style, with high ceilings and marble floors, and a lobby that smelled of money and old wood and the faint, faded perfume of the women who had once graced its halls. By 1968, when our story begins, the Grand Hotel had seen better days. The marble floors. Exactly what he was, a man who had married for money and had eventually decided to take the money and run. But the case against him was not as strong as it appeared. Riley had found evidence of the poison, but he had not found evidence that Crane had administered it. The laboratory in the basement could have belonged to anyone. The bottle of fate digitalis could have been planted by anyone. And then, 2 weeks into the trial, a witness came forward. Her name was Margaret O'Brien. She was the
6. The restoration. The fundraising campaign raised enough money to repair the roof and replace the projector and reupholster the seats. The Historical Society designated the Reds as a protected landmark, and Henry, seeing what his son had accomplished, changed his mind about selling. He gave Michael the theater, not because he believed in saving old buildings, but because he believed in his son, and because, in his own way, he had come to understand what the Ritz meant, the grand reopening. But there was no direct evidence connecting him to the sabotage itself. Harold Dunn went to trial in March of 1974. The trial lasted 6 weeks, and it was covered by every newspaper in the country. The prosecutor called Michael as a witness, and he testified about the damage he had found, about the months of careful work that would have been required to weaken the cables to the point of failure. The defense attorney argued that Dunn was a bitter man who had made
Leave them to you. Take care of them. Love them. And when you are gone, leave them to someone who will do the same. That is the only legacy that matters. Elizabeth read the entry 3 times. Then she closed the journal and held it against her chest, and she cried. She spent the last years of her life in the house at 14 Sycamore Lane. She restored the garden and the greenhouse. She propagated Clara's plants and shared them with botanical gardens around the world. And when she died, at the age O'Connor had died 6 months ago, and that she, Mary, was the sole heir to the grandmother's estate. The estate consisted of a house on a hill on the outskirts of town, along with approximately 10 acres of land and the contents within. Mary had never met her grandmother. Her mother, Catherine's daughter, had left Millbrook when she was 20 and had never gone back. Mary had grown up hearing stories about the old woman who lived in the house on the hill, stories told in hushed tones, with a
In the Corner, Chapter 3, The Student. Whitby was a small town in the mountains of Vermont, 3 hours north of Boston. Clara drove up on a bright June morning, leaving behind the heat and the noise of the city for the cool air and the quiet of the countryside. The conservatory was a large old house on the outskirts of town, with a wide porch and a garden full of roses. Margaret Holbrook met Clara at the door, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a warm smile. "Thank you for coming." "Found," Margaret called in October. "We are having a concert," she said. "At the end of the semester, every student will perform. I would like Lily to be one of them." "I'll ask her," Clara said. Lily said yes. And then she added, but only if you play too. Clara hesitated. She had not performed in 7 years. She was not sure she still could. Please, Lily said. I want people to hear what you can do. The concert was on a cold December evening, in the concert hall of the